coming up on the Woven Energy podcast.
One of the ways you can show your experience, if you're ever lucky enough to find a shop selling multiple Shaman drums, or you want to fake your experiences, you just smell them. Yeah, it's something that Shamans do when they're evaluating a drum. They stick their nose in the back
they'll be quite impressed with you then.
See, yeah, I just don't think it's going to the sort of thing that's going to impress your New Age friends in the West, but it's a smell. Really, in scientific terms, it's the only part of the brain with a very direct link to the limbic system. Hold the drum high, you hold it in front of your left shoulder. If it's a full-size Shaman drum, it should be very, very easy for you to incline your head down into the back of the drum. There are virtually on infinite techniques in shamanism. But today we're going to talk about some very important ones. Hand position is quite important. So if you're buying a drum, or if you're making a drum, then the internal layout that I recommend is one that the Mongols call hurt. This is so fundamental. It's a very, very fundamental technique, and shamans the world over do this technique or something very, very similar to it. Or when the in-breath stops and the out-breath starts to build, that's when that's when the drum is struck. I didn't say that's when you strike the drum. Let's address the techniques in the right way. Let's address them as shamans and not as members of civilized, settled societies. Now I'm going to ask you to do something without thinking, and you're probably going to be asking yourself whether that's achievable. Take it from me, it is.
Hey guys, welcome to the Woven Energy podcast with me, Joseph Sarkora, and Damon Smith. We're here once again to talk about shamanism from the ground up. Here we are on episode 17, and we're going to be continuing stage 2, which is all on the breath. If you haven't listened to the previous episode 16, then please listen to that. It kind of lays the foundation as to what stage 2 is. So an important thing to note is that whilst we are talking about learning shamanism in stages, it's important not to think of it as a hierarchy. You know, you do stage 1, then you do stage 2, then stage 3, etc. This is not the case, and we can separate them into stages for the purpose of learning it, but really all these stages are one, and each rest on the other. So we're here at stage 2, and we're about to get practical, but remember, stage 1 is so important. Chillicity. This is your protection against imagination. It's your protection against delusion, protection against what a lot of people think shamanism is, and you don't want to fall into that trap and your shamanism means nothing. So make sure you continue practicing stage 1, which is episodes 7, 8, and 9. So Damon, I know you've got a lot of exercises to go over, so should we jump straight in?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess the first thing to do is just to remind ourselves of what it is we're doing here.
Absolutely.
Last time we talked about energy and the shamanistic concept of energy, and the fact that shamanism is to a great extent about energy change and undifferentiation between the shaman and nature. That undifferentiation is an activity that is very, very much concerned with energy. So we talked about Ashtim, which is just kind of plain old energy, the potential to cause change within the energy weave of the universe. And we talked about Huch, which is changing energy. It's the energy of changing energy. There's a great and ambiguous sentence, the energy of changing energy, that kind of demonstrates the problem with English when talking about this stuff. So as we go through the techniques, I'm going to use mainly Mongol names. There will be a few Japanese ones, perhaps a couple of Chinese ones, depending on how we go. I'm deliberately not going to translate those names into English. That's just so we've already done 3 episodes on the miasma. I don't want to have to I don't think at this point we want to do yet more episodes on the miasma, and we probably have to do a whole episode on the name of each technique. So let's just take it's just like the name of the technique is a sound, and just try to, if you want to use and, putting things in little boxes is something we as Westerners we feel the need to do. And if you really want to put some things into a little box, then put it into a box with this sound on it, so that you, therefore not translating the sound into English, you can definitely avoid that by not knowing what the Mongol words mean. And just take it that the Mongol words mean the thing that I'm telling you about. Yeah, that's probably the best way to put it. Yeah. So, the names, they're not really names in our sense. And this is not just true for Amskar. This is true for all of the levels in the stack, the big hug that is shamanism. They're not names in the way that we use names, in our everyday, labels on little boxes. They're either a description of the technique itself, or they are a description of the thing that the technique is intended to familiarize you with. And so shamanism has loads of techniques, unbelievable amount of techniques. And when you get to an advanced level in shamanism, you start to understand this as part of the Toshalti, and you start to understand how to come up with your own techniques, and you understand how shamanistic technique works. That there are verging on infinite techniques in shamanism. But today we're going to talk about some very important ones. In fact, we're going to talk about one of the most important ones, which is to do with the breath. The breathing. I think we said last time that the cells in the body need oxygen to do that ashjim thing, and the oxygen therefore needs to move because inside the cells the oxygen is continually getting used up in the process of making adenosine triphosphate. And therefore, that oxygen has to be replaced. So we need a circulatory system. It's not just about the cells themselves. We need a circulatory system that brings the oxygen to those cells. In some very simple organisms, don't need a circulatory system because oxygen can move through just simple diffusion. If you've got a place like the inside of a cell that's using up oxygen where there isn't very much oxygen, and you've got another place like the air where there's a reasonable amount, then if or the water in the sea where there's a reasonable amount, then just by diffusion, that oxygen will move from the place where there's quite a bit of oxygen to the place where there isn't any or there's hardly any. So, but the problem with diffusion is it only works over really, really short ranges. That's the problem with it. The benefit of it is that diffusion itself doesn't require any energy at all. It's just it's almost like physics. It's just something that happens if you get an oxygen gradient from high concentration to low concentration. The oxygen will move towards low concentration. So some of the energy that the body produces is used to maintain this flow of oxygen to the cells. And, that's probably everybody's done something, bit of biology in school. It's the heart taking oxygenated blood from the lungs, pumping it around the body. And then it goes out through the arteries, and then it goes to the extremities or to the muscles or to wherever it's needed. And then it comes back to the right side of the heart. And as sort of deoxygenated blood. And then it gets pumped from the right side of the heart back to the lungs again. It goes around and around in a cycle. That cycle, depending on how fast the heart's beating, we talked about conscious control of the heart and autonomic control of the heart, and it actually has its own pacemaker as well. That how fast the heart's beating, that cycle takes a variable amount of time. Obviously, if the heart's beating faster, it's quicker. But generally, you can think of the round trip taking up to a minute. So it's quite fast. It's not slow. So the oxygen from the lungs, diffusion is used inside the lungs to get the oxygen into the blood, and then diffusion is used at the extremities or wherever it's needed in the capillaries in the body to get oxygen out of the red blood cells and into the cells so that it can be used to make an ATP. Obviously, that takes energy as well. But the way in which the system actually functions under the control of the nervous system, under the control of the autonomic nervous system, and under the control of various other things, for instance, hormones and stuff like that. It's a complex system. It's a very, very complex system. We talked a little bit about the complexity of the chemistry that just happens inside the cells. Well, that's not all there is to it. There's a bigger picture. That picture, if we ever dive down to it in scientific detail, just take it from me, that's going to be an awful lot of episodes. It's horrendously complicated. But as we've said before on podcasts previously, shamanism provides a framework. It provides a kind of simplified framework that you use to come to an understanding. That's a mind, body, and spirit understanding. And shamanism has an advantage over other similar frameworks in that shamanism does use the mind, the body, and the spirit to implement its frameworks. It's not just the mind, and that provides us with a tremendous advantage. That means we can understand, because things like this, things like the, Amskar, they are of the midline. There's a lot of midline in there, and there's a lot of top line in there. They're very, very difficult to understand on the baseline, but shamans don't feel the need to understand things on the baseline. So when I'm explaining the techniques, in a moment, I'm going to explain a very, very important technique. When I'm explaining the techniques, there's a tendency for, miasmatic people, civilized, settled people, to think that the purpose of the technique is to result in baseline understanding, to result in the roots of the tree understanding. And of course, in shamanism, that is absolutely not the purpose of most of the techniques. There are some techniques for that, but they're in the minority. If you remember,
that's something that applies to everything within shamanism, isn't it? Because we do something in society, and that does lead to what we think is understanding.
Exactly. And so what I'm saying is, when you're starting out on these techniques, don't start out with the assumption that the technique is going to lead to baseline understanding. Start out with the assumption that the technique is going to lead to primarily midline and top line understanding of what it is we're doing. We will then, in our downtime episodes, we will then go through the baseline understanding to satisfy all of our baseline curiosity, because we have that kind of curiosity as a settled civilized species. So what I'm saying is, let's address the techniques in the right way. Let's address them as shamans and not as members of civilized settled societies.
I just want to recap one sec. When we talk about baseline understanding in this episode, we're talking about logical and rational understanding in this context.
That's right. Yeah. And so what I'm suggesting is, let's give it a rest. Let's give the baseline understanding a rest. And for a couple of episodes, let's try to do what Fan Quan encouraged us to do, which is to focus on midline and top line understanding. Once we're past the bulk of the Amskar exercises, then we'll do some more downtime episodes, and we'll go back over some of the baseline stuff. Does that sound reasonable? Yeah.
That sounds cool.
Yeah. Okay. So the very, very important technique that I want to talk about for us is Bohkhgeen Hengreg. I think with that glossary that we said we were going to do, we probably need to. So I apologize. They're not easy to pronounce, these things, but I'm not going to tell you what it means deliberately. Because if I did tell you what it meant, it would, a better way to put it is, not understanding is much better position to be in from the point of view of shamanism than misunderstanding. Yeah. So that's why I'm not going to translate it. It's a drum technique, so you're going to need a drum for this. And at one level, when you get on with your shamanism, any kind of drum is fine. Yeah, it doesn't even have to be a drum. It can be, many times I've done it drumming on the back of my hand. Yeah, so it doesn't have to be a real drum. But I suggest for when you're starting out, you do use a drum. So what's quite important with this particular Bohkhgeen Hengreg is,
just say that once more.
Bohkhgeen Hengreg.
Bohkhgeen Hengreg.
Very good, Joe.
Okay.
If you've got a real shaman's drum, that's fantastic, yeah. But if you've got a kiddie's tambourine, then you're going to have to make do, yeah. The size of the drum, again, for beginners, a large drum is better than for starting out. I say beginners. I say for starting out, a large drum is much better than a small drum. You need to be able to easily cover your face with the drum. We need to talk about how to hold the drum. Shaman's drums, in Mongolia, there are various different layouts, internal layouts within the drum. So the drum, everyone's probably aware, you've probably seen them. If not, I'm sure you can just do a search on Google Images on Shaman drum, something like that. Yeah. There's a wooden frame, and then there's a skin membrane that is stretched, tensioned over that frame, and it's usually done with cords of some type. But the interesting thing is, internally within the drum there are various layouts. So in terms of how you actually hold the drum, and the way that for Bohkhgeen Hengreg, I want you to hold the drum in as close as possible a way to the folded wings position from if you remember the Tilin exercise. You remember Tilin isn't a Mongol word, it's a Siberian word, yeah?
Episode 8.
Yeah. The folded wings position, the left hand, unless you're practicing your Toshal Teen, in which case the right hand, but generally the left hand is in that folded wings position. So that would be the palm of the hand is facing inwards towards your body. And the forearm, the left forearm, is angling upwards at a sort of 45-degree angle. And depending on the internal layout of your drum, you will be able to get closer to that hand position. The hand position is quite important. So if you're buying a drum, or if you're making a drum, then the internal layout that I recommend is one that the Mongols call hurt, which is like the spokes of a wheel. The tensioning cords actually go across the back of the drum, like the spokes of a wheel, and there's a central part where they're all tied together. And the hurt layout of the drum is excellent. I can put myself in the folded wings position from the Tilin. You probably gathered now that in Mongol, that folded wings position is called habtas. And although it's in the exercise that I call Tilin, we talked about that before. Habtas is a Mongol word. The habtas position, I can put myself in that position, and with a hurt layout, that's the spokes of a wheel layout in terms of the tensioning cords, I can just hook the drum onto my hand without making any change to the position of my hand or forearm. So it's a great layout for being able to tie up your use of the drum to your spirit dance. That's why I prefer this layout. Yeah. In spirit dance, we use a drum. We don't always use a drum, but we use a drum in spirit dance while we're doing spirit dance, and obviously there's a lot of movement involved. That hurt layout gives you a lot of options in terms of not dropping your drum. Yeah. So it's a good one. So that's my recommendation. But if you have to hold it in some other way because the internal layout doesn't allow that, then just do it to figure out what the closest hand position to that is you can. You hold the drum high, you hold it in front of your left shoulder high. If it's a full-size shaman drum, it should be very, very easy for you to incline your head down into the back of the drum. Right. So you can practice this to start off with. It's probably best to practice the holding position standing. And maybe I'll take a photo of me holding a hurt drum in a habtas position.
Yeah.
Just like my hand and forearm, so you can see how the hand goes into the tensioning strings to hold the drum. And maybe we can stick that in the notes below. It's probably, without seeing that, it's probably going to be hard just from a description. Yeah. The drum is held high in front of the left shoulder and in front of your body for this technique. And if your drum is a decent size, it should be very easy for you to incline your head downwards into the back of the drum, the upper back of the drum, which is something that we do during the Bohkhgeen Hengreg exercise or technique. But actually, that position with the head inclined down into the drum is widely used in shamanism. If you just search for Mongolian shamanism, I dispute that there is such a thing as Mongolian shamanism. There's just shamanism to me, but people on YouTube, they probably think differently. So if you do a search on Mongolian shamanism, you'll probably see shamans holding the drum in the haptas position. It's the most common way to hold the drum. It's not the only way to hold it, but it's the most common way to hold it. And you can do that sitting, or you can do that standing. But as we do the Bohkhgeen Hengreg technique, our head is going to be inclined down into the back of that drum. Something to say about that is that the part of the brain, or the part of the shaman that deals with smell, is the only part, really, in scientific terms, it's the only part of the brain with a very direct link to the limbic system. As we've said before, the limbic system within the brain is a part of the brain that's heavily associated with the upper world, with the top line. Yeah. And that's actually the only part of the brain that deals with sensory information with a kind of what you would call a direct link to the limbic system. Other parts go via various routes to the limbic system. And so smell is very, very important in shamanism. It's not something that people think about, but smell is very, very important. And it's important that the drum doesn't smell bad. Yeah. Because you're going to use the smell of the drum, as a way of linking yourself into it in a very direct way. We're going to use the smell of the drum with the breathing. Obviously, you're breathing in and out of the back of the drum, the void space behind the membrane. You're breathing in and out of there, and a good drum smells amazing. It's a mixture of hide and wood, and
so it's a very natural smell.
And it needs to be a smell they all smell different. Yeah, they all smell different.
Yeah, we're not talking about any specifically shaman drum specific smell here. We're just talking about a natural woody, earthy kind of smell.
Even from the same person who makes it, the two different drums can smell different. Yeah, but it has to be a pleasant smell. And so it's, one of the ways you can show your experience, if you're ever lucky enough to find a shop selling multiple shaman drums, or you want to fake your experiences, you just smell them. Yeah, it's something that shamans do when they're evaluating a drum. They stick their nose in the back.
They'll be quite impressed with you then.
See, it's not. I just don't think it's going to the sort of thing that's going to impress your new age friends in the West. But if you're in Mongolia, you can show you really know what you're doing. You stick your nose in the back of the drum and see what it smells like. The smell has to be present to breathe in. For all the Amskar exercises, as well for most shamanism exercises, don't use a drum that smells bad. That's cut a long story short.
I'm finding it hard to understand a drum that would smell bad. Is it just one that's gone off a bit, or there might be a bit of damp or something? What
those of us that have engaged in the practice of making your own drum are probably very familiar with drums that don't smell that great. At least when you get started.
Okay.
Yeah, but it needs to be pleasant. Yeah, and like I said, even somebody who's good, I'm not good at making sham drum. It's a very, very skilled thing to make a nice drum. Some of the artwork is phenomenal. what I'm saying is that even somebody who's good at making shaman drums, they will make a variety of drums that smell differently from each other, and somebody who's experienced with shaman drums will go and have a smell of those drums, and some of them will be better than others. And this is part of the variety within nature. Nothing's ever fixed, and we said in the business world, you can plan all you want, but no plan survives contact with the enemy. And this is the same. There are good drums. And there are better drums.
Whilst we're on the topic of drums, this is my baseline question. You said the painting is really intricate. Is there a purpose to the image on the drum?
Or is that miasma episode? Yes, there can be. But there can be a variety of purposes. One of which can be to, it's in a drum shop. It looks cool. Somebody's more likely to buy it if the artwork is awesome.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, there can be. But it depends what the drums. Many shaman drums are not decorated. So, it's certainly not essential, the artwork, but it can be amazing, And for years and years, I made do with either homemade drums or just some kind of improvised thing,
How this might
in
be going
later
down
life. In later life, I do have an extremely nice drum. I love the thing, but that's a bad way to look at shamanism. I've got this awesome drum. So what?
Would you recommend people buy a drum or experiment making their own?
Depends how much of a hurry you're in.
Sounds a fascinating task to make your own drum.
Yeah.
I could imagine it sets you back a bit.
The end product. It's not that you make your own drum; you make a series of your own drums, and gradually they get better. It's a bit more like that,
Did you use proper animal skins then?
Among other things, yeah. Joe, the torsion teen in the old days, I was very enthusiastic. I used all sorts of things. Yeah. All sorts of things. Anyway. But in terms of what is a drum to me, one of the things I used to use when I was younger, when I first started out on this stuff, was it was a biscuit tin, and I just took the lid off it and emptied it out and made a little thing to hold it inside, and then I was banging on the back of the biscuit tin, yeah? So there's a metal drum, yeah? So,
okay, fantastic. I get the idea.
It didn't smell bad, it smelled of biscuits, Anyway, okay. So to the exercise, okay? So you hold the drum in the habtas position, and the palm, as I said, of the hand is inward. You want to...
This is the left hand, isn't it?
Unless you're practicing your torsion teen.
Right. Yeah. But it's the left hand first. And then
I wouldn't say it's... let's say it's predominantly the left hand. Yeah? Predominantly the left hand. But if you want to do it right hand, that's very shamanistic. Yeah? Mm-hmm. So you want to stand or sit comfortably. You can sit cross-legged on the ground. That's quite cool. If your drum's big enough, you can use your legs to support it, stop your arm getting tired if you're doing it for a long time. But the key point is to be comfortable. You don't want to be worrying about discomfort. This is not an adagio exercise. This is a technique where you need to attain a state of chillicity and hold it. So you hold the drum, you incline your head down in towards the drum, into the upper back of the drum, so that you're breathing the air from inside the drum. Do you breathe through your nose? Do you breathe through your mouth? Doesn't matter. Usually this is not a very tiring exercise, so it's not like your heart rate's going to be going high or anything. So you can just breathe through your nose if you want. I tend to do a bit of both. That's just so I can get the smell of the drum. What I want is the drum and me not to be separate. I want it to be the same thing, not two different things. So just I personally very slightly open the mouth. And I'm sort of breathing 50-50 through the mouth and through the the nose. We think of smell, but actually taste and smell, there's some sort of linkage there, and it gives a richer Definitely. Interaction, So at that point, you then turn on your chelicity. This is you starting the exercise. Now, this is what we were talking about previously. If you're at stage 2, which is what we're talking about, and you find it difficult to turn on your chelicity, that doesn't mean you need to work harder on your stage 2. It means you need to work harder on your stage 1. So if you can't sit there with your head inclined to the drum and just switch on your chelicity, then you know which episodes you need to be going back and listening to, 7, 8, and 9. Because to start on level 2, to start on the Amsker, you need to be able to switch chelicity on, just like instantly or very, very quickly. Yeah.
Not thinking, not rationalizing, in the moment, completely.
Hang in the moment. No desire for what's coming next. No thought for what's gone in the past. And just sit there or stand there and turn your chelicity on and breathe the drum. Take the smell. You can just breathe through your nose if the 50-50 mouth and nose thing is. Take the smell and just like, remember Burj Shikhat Harate, you're the eagle above the plane, and you take all of that in. You take it all equally. You take it, yeah. And you want no distinction between the oxygen, the air, the smell, the drum, the environment. You want all of that distinction to fall away, and you take it all equally. So that's the first part of Bohkhgeen Hengreg, is just to achieve chelicity in that position, holding the drum.
And we're not hitting the drum yet, are we?
Yes. And I'm deliberately not going to tell you what's going to happen with the smell of the drum and all that kind of stuff, because that's for nature to feed back to you. It's not for me to tell you. It's for nature to feed back to you what is going to happen. Mm. When you've practiced this a few times and you're comfortable, that you can switch your chelicity on in that position. You then, incidentally, when I say incline your head, I don't mean like at a 90-degree angle, or you have to stretch down underneath something or something. You'll see shamans quite like to use quite large drums, and that just makes your life easier. So there's no such thing as a drum that's too big, but there is such a thing as a drum that's too small. If you're not experienced. Yeah. So, and also obviously the drum needs an open back. I should have mentioned that. You definitely don't want to be using a drum that has a closed back. Yeah. Otherwise there won't be any air for you to be breathing out of it. Yeah. It kind of goes without saying, but anyway, I probably should have said that. So next stage. So you're in chelicity. I remember ages ago in one of the podcasts, I said one of my guides asked me to walk to a particular place without thinking. Yeah. And I was questioning whether that's achievable. Now I'm going to ask you to do something without thinking, and you're probably going to be asking yourself whether that's achievable. Okay. Take it from me. It is. Yeah. Mm. So you might have to practice a bit, but it is. So what I want you to do is, when your breath changes, that is, we breathe in and we breathe out. If you want to call that yin and yang, then then fine. Yeah. But we breathe in and we breathe out. So there's a tidal change in the breath. There's a point where it changes direction. The out breath is completed and the in breath is just starting to build. And there's a point where the in breath is completed and the out breath is starting to build. Now, the importance of chelicity here is that we have, as we've said, we have conscious control of our breathing. But for this technique, we don't want to use it. We want the breathing to be under the control, or if you're in scientific terms, we want your breathing to be under control of the autonomic nervous system, not under conscious control. That's going to be very, very hard. This is a basic exercise, a basic technique. It's a very difficult technique for members of settled civilized societies because we're obsessed with thinking about things. But the bottom line is, when that change happens, that's when the drum is struck. The thing you're using to strike the drum can just be your hand. So your other hand's also in the folded wings position. So you can see now that the folded wings position, the Habtas position, it comes from drumming. It's used without a drum, but it comes from drumming because that's the position you hold the drum in and the hand that strikes the drum.
So it'd be one arm inside the drum, one arm outside the drum. Ready to strike it. Okay.
Exactly. And that is where the Habtas position, although the drum isn't used in the Tilling exercise, that's where the Habtas position comes from in the first place. It comes from drumming. So you can use a beater to strike the drum as well. Some drums, if you're buying one, it probably comes with a beater, so you might as well use it. Again, you want the hand that's holding the beater to be as close as possible to that Habtas position as possible. Well, if you're hitting it with your hand, that makes that dead easy. It can be in exactly that position, but you can hold the beater, whatever's the closest to that you can achieve. Yeah. So
can we just reverse that a little bit back up to the when we're breathing and it becomes under the control of the autonomic nervous system?
No, when you breathe and you don't think about breathing, it is under the control of the autonomic nervous system. As soon as you think about breathing, then your breath comes under conscious control. This is why this exercise, this technique does not work without chelicity, because the chelicity is what allows you to leave the breath under its if you like its resting state. The control of it's not in terms of the control of, to a shaman it wouldn't be the control of the autonomic nervous system, it would just be the way breathing normally is.
Well, I'm a bit worried now because you were saying I think it's me that brought it up, but one of the exercises to achieve BAT or chelicity or a clear mind is to concentrate on the breath, just breathing in and out and count them. So that's absolutely not.
No, that's not one of the exercises to achieve chelicity. That's a trick that you can use. It's a trick that you can use to start off. Yeah. But if you need that trick by this stage, you shouldn't be starting out on stage 2. You should be back on your chelicity exercises. You definitely, at this stage, you're starting out at Amsker. You need to be good enough at chelicity that you don't need to be counting sheep or anything. Yeah. You should have enough feeling for chelicity, enough. You should have embraced it. Remember, we said this is about embracing. You should have embraced chelicity to the extent that you do not need a count to stop yourself thinking. Yeah. If you need a count to stop yourself thinking, you're back to stage 1. And this is why I'm saying, I might have mentioned the importance of chelicity once or twice. Yeah. But you can now see why it's important. Yeah. Because the exercises or the techniques, they're techniques, they're not exercises. Once you get to stage 2, the techniques do not work unless you're in a state of chelicity. They do not work. And that counting is not a state of chelicity. It's a state of lightweight thinking. And we're trying to move from a state of, when we're learning stage 1, we're using that if we want to use that. There's other ways to do it. We're moving from a state of heavyweight thinking to lightweight thinking so that we can then progress to no thinking. And so, but for stage 2, Famska, you have to be able to do chelicity without any thinking at all. No counting, no nothing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that's why I said when the breath changes, when the out breath stops and the in breath starts to build, or when the in breath stops and the out breath starts to build, that's when that's when the drum is struck. I didn't say that's when you strike the drum.
Yes.
And when you start off, of course, your miasma's going to kick in, the bass line's going to come up, you're going to think, goodness me.
Do I strike the drum now?
Do I say exactly? And what's the exact right time? No, that you need this. You can practice this at Amsker if your chelicity is good enough. That even if your chelicity is good, you'll still get that stuff going on. But familiarization, habituation in these techniques is also important. This Bohkhgeen Hengreg, if you follow shamanism, if you become a shaman, this is something you're going to be practicing a lot in your life, this technique. This is so fundamental. It's a very, very fundamental technique. And shamans the world over do this technique or something very, very similar to it. And the importance of this technique is to learn the first of all, the first thing we've got to do is learn the method of the technique, learn the technique, the mechanics of it, and then embrace that into our chelicity such that we are doing the technique and the technique is part of our chelicity. So here's how to know if you're doing Bohkhgeen Hengreg wrong. If the breath is leading the beat, you're doing it wrong. If the beat is leading the breath, you're doing it wrong. Does that make some kind of sense?
What do you mean by leading?
Well, if I'm hitting the drum because I finished breathing out, then I'm doing it wrong. If I'm finishing breathing out because I'm hitting the drum, then I'm doing it wrong. The two things, this exercise has to be practiced until the two things become, there's no chicken and egg. There's no causality. The drum beat is part of the breathing, and the breathing is part of the drum beat, and there is no separation at all in a state of chelicity. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that's what, with Bohkhgeen Hengreg, that's what you're aiming for in the first level. Bohkhgeen Hengreg itself has many levels because it's a big, if you like, famous shamanic technique. Although, yeah, famous. Fame in the tiny little shamanistic circles, it's famous, you know. But it has, you know, people have worked on it. I've worked on it quite a bit, and different people have worked on it over the years. And some people, do you remember I said my main shamanistic technique is spirit dance? Yeah. Well, there are people who use this as their main shamanistic technique, and those people do all sorts of variations on this, all sorts of variations. So take it further than what you've described. I'm going to describe more. I'm going to describe the next stage and the one after that as well. Yeah.
Cool.
Certainly the next stage, and actually I think I'll stay off the one after that, but certainly the next stage.
Until next episode.
We'll come back to it at some point. Yeah. Okay. I could describe it, but then I'm thinking nobody's going to be able to do it. So what's the point? Yeah. So it's like, we'll come back to it later. Yeah. Okay. So Bohkhgeen Hengreg, this is a difficult exercise. It's not an easy, it's a difficult technique. I want to get off that word exercise because there's a lot of baseline stuff associated with that word exercise in our language. So let's call it a technique. I don't have a problem with the word technique so much. The Bohkhgeen Hengreg technique, is important. So when you're first learning it, I don't think you should be doing it for more than, a few minutes each time you try it. Because you will be dealing with all that baseline stuff.
Do you mean a few minutes after you've managed to drop into chelicity?
Yeah,
Because it would take, in the early stages, I know for me it does take a while to drop into anything.
That's the issue. And if this is part of the issue. You're right. It may take you a few minutes or moments to drop into chelicity, but really that means what does that mean, Joe?
Yes.
Episode 789, I refer to.
Yes, Master Damon.
I think that if you take a few moments to drop into chelicity, that's good enough. Yeah. Ideally, to do this exercise, you should be able to switch on instantly. You shouldn't have to take a few moments to get the most out of this exercise. But if you're practicing this exercise this technique alongside the chelicity techniques, then no problem. You're still working on your chelicity, so you'll get to the place where you can drop in instantly.
Well, that's probably where Tillin drops in, isn't it? The exercise that you described in episode 8.
Yeah. And here, we talked about catalyst as well. If you wanted to, there's no need to, but if you wanted to use a catalyst, you could at this point, if your bat was particularly strong.
Yeah.
If you have the level of bat needed to make sure that that catalyst is not going to tear down the wall between the barrier between your imagination and reality, or between your imagination and your spirit, and you're confident that you can stop that from happening, then here's an example point when you could use a catalyst.
Yeah.
I don't use them, don't feel I need to use them. We'll not talk about the old days, but in this day and age, I see them as counterproductive, and don't do that anymore. So what you want to achieve is, again, we're aiming at Chillicity, but we're doing the Bohkhgeen Hengreg technique. So we're going from Chillicity, learning the technique, back to Chillicity again. So in many ways, where I've said Chillicity is part of the different layers of the pagoda, really, you now see why the onion analogy is a bad one, because all we're doing each time is returning to Chillicity. And you will be good at the technique. You'll be good at the first level of Bohkhgeen Hengreg when it's happening. The technique is happening. There's no distinction between you and the drum. There's no distinction ultimately between you and the environment. There's no distinction between the breathing, the circulation, the use of the energy within the body. It's all one. And this is what I meant when I was talking about this being an exercise that's of the midline and top line. We want to give it a rest. We want to give the baseline a rest when we're doing this technique. And other techniques in shamanism, we need to give that a rest. And my warning is that you're in terms of achieving that, is that you were very likely to start thinking, what am I learning from this exercise?
Yeah.
But what you mean by that is, which is fine, there's a perfectly good question on the baseline and on the top line, because on the midline and the top line, because this is a midline and top line exercise. It's a perfectly good question. But the answer is, on the baseline, you're not actually trying to learn anything at all out of this exercise. You're only trying to learn midline and top line things. So in the end, the ultimates, one of the good ways to think about Shaman technique is, what would it be like when I'm doing it properly? What it'll be like is, it's happening. That's it. It's happening. And there will be no distinction. You will feel no distinction between you and the drum, and hopefully further afield, the environment as well. But at the very minimum, you and the drum, there will be no distinction. And as I said, the smell and the sense is very, very useful. The smell of the drum and the sense of the drum is very, very useful for locking you into that. So to recap, what's happening at this level of Bohkhgeen Hengreg is you are breathing and the drum is beating. The drum is beating when the breath changes, when the breath makes a reversal. But that is happening. You're not doing it. Do you understand the distinction?
I do. Okay.
And you need to practice it a lot for that to happen, but it will be a state of Chillicity. It will be, if you want to think of it in sort of more scientific terms, the activity of Bohkhgeen Hengreg, the activity has become habituated. That's the ultimate goal of this exercise. The activity is habituated, and in that, your midline and your top line will be learning a lot of stuff. It's just that your baseline won't be learning a great deal.
With the drumming, when we hit the drum, this, from what I can tell, this isn't the kind of thing you see then where it's bum 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 bum.
No,
bum.
definitely not.
That's not that. We're just hitting. The drum is hit,
I'm coming on to that, but it's not that. Yeah.
Okay. So if you're going to talk about that, because I'm just a bit confused how we're actually using the drum.
We're just hitting it you're in the position.
There's just one hit. That's it. There's no rhythm to it. There's nothing.
Well, there is a rhythm, but obviously because it's based on your breathing and you're not exercising, you can do this. For instance, you can do the same thing once you get used to Bohkhgeen Hengreg. You can do this during your spirit dance. You're dancing around. Your breathing is going to be going faster, so the drum is going faster. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but this is not. This is not, unless you're exercising, this is not a short duration beat. This is a long duration beat, obviously. But the point is, it's your breathing. It's the reversals in your breathing that are deciding what that beat is. And that beat will be different for everybody. And it'll be different for different people in different situations. It will be different from you as an individual at different times, different places.
What this isn't is a constant random beat which puts us in a trance, which is what's most commonly accepted. I'm only bringing that up because that might be the perception that people have.
Well, again, we are using an English word trance that has an awful lot of cultural baggage associated with it. Yeah. It's the purpose of it. This is slightly more advanced than that, where you use a regular beat. We described that in the chillicity level, where you're using a regular beat to put yourself into a state of chillicity. No. Yeah. You are in a state of chillicity.
Yeah.
The beat is with the breathing. Yeah.
Yeah.
The beat is one with the breath, with the breathing. And so the drum, unless you're doing Bohkhgeen Hengreg during your spirit dance and you're going at 300 miles an hour in your spirit dance, then it won't be going boom, 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 boom. Yeah. Okay. So that's the first level of Bohkhgeen Hengreg. Yeah. I'm now gonna, I think, unless you've got a lot of experience in shamanism, a lot of practice in shamanism, I think you need to practice that a lot before you go on to the level I'm going to talk about. But this is the second stage of Bohkhgeen Hengreg. But I'm going to tell you about it because in telling you about it, you will learn something on the baseline that will probably convince you to try not to use the baseline, which is what I want you to do. Okay?
Yeah.
So the second stage, when you've done it on the breath, is to do it on the heartbeat. So it's exactly the same technique, except that it's not the breath driving the drum, it's the heartbeat. Or it's the drum is not with the breath and it's not with the heartbeat. And so I know what some people are probably thinking, what, do I take my pulse while I'm no. Yeah. If you don't know what your pulse is, if you don't know what your heartbeat is, your chillicity isn't good enough. Yeah? Do you remember we said all this stuff is testable? Yeah?
Yeah.
It's testable. If you don't know what your pulse is, your chillicity isn't good enough to go on to the second stage of Bohkhgeen Hengreg. People tend to be a lot more aware of what their breathing is than what their pulse is. Of course, with the first stage of Bohkhgeen Hengreg, when it's with the breath, when the beat is with the breath, then you're more aware of what your breath is. But of course, that can be a double-edged sword. The fact that you're more aware of what your breath is means you're more likely to alter your breathing because you're aware of that. And of course, that's not what we want in Bohkhgeen Hengreg. We don't want you to alter your breathing by thinking about your breathing. We want the breathing to be completely normal, completely the resting state. We want it to be the top line driving the breathing, not the baseline, although the baseline is very able to do so. So when it comes on to you to go to the second level, if you do want to practice it, you need to have that sense of everything being one. That's the most important thing in Bohkhgeen Hengreg. If you have any sense of if there's any sense in it of separation, of things being distinct from each other, then more practice is needed. Once you have that sense with the breathing, and again, like we said, practicing your chillicity for the rest of your life. If you're serious about shamanism, I would recommend although there are many other alternate techniques you could use, I would recommend that Bohkhgeen Hengreg is something that you practice for the rest of your life. Always trying to improve the unity. And there are, as I've said, there are various levels of it. And if you want, even at level 1, at the base level of Bohkhgeen Hengreg, when it's on the breath, then even at that level, there's a hugely challenging long-term thing, which is to be not just separate. There's no separation between you and the drum. There's no separation between you and the drum and the rest of the world. That's a kind of more challenging, on the environment, the rest of the environment. So, and then obviously doing your spirit dance and various other things. So, but when it's on the heartbeat, then it will be quicker. The beat will be quicker. Yeah.
Is that why when we see some Mongolian shamans doing this, it is the rhythms like bum, 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 bum. That's what they're doing. They're following the heart.
Sometimes they are, and sometimes they aren't. As I've said, there are many, many techniques in shamanism. Yeah, this is a fairly basic one. Yeah. But no, when you see a shaman beating a drum, there's all kind of things, and this is the problem with trying to view shamanism from the point of view of a Western settled, or not even Western, just a settled civilized society. There's an inbuilt assumption that because I don't know about a subject, it must be a small subject. And that is a dangerous assumption. Yeah. And it's if you make that assumption approaching shamanism, then that's probably the worst assumption, the most incorrect assumption that is possible to make in your entire life. Shamanism is probably a bigger subject than any other subject that you've studied. It's a bigger subject. So when you see a shaman beating his drum, you're saying, is that what he's doing? Well, he may be doing that, or he may be doing tens of thousands of other things. Yeah. Yeah. So it's, that's probably the best way to put it. Yeah. But this is on the balance of probability. If you see a shaman doing that type of thing, then on the balance of probability, there's probably a likelihood, I don't know what the percentage would be, perhaps 20% that is indeed what he's doing, Bohkhgeen Hengreg, because it is such a fundamental exercise, a fundamental technique, and not for any other reason. Yeah.
So by extension, we could say using a drum isn't particularly Bohkhgeen Hengreg. It's just that you happen to be using a drum for that particular technique. You can use a drum for many, many, many other techniques.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can use a drum in pretty much any technique. As I've said, sometimes I do my spirit dance with a drum. So that's quite an interesting challenge, because of the dynamics of it, and because, it's an interesting challenge in terms of the familiarities. As we said, again, just like Bohkhgeen Hengreg, the spirit dance, it also needs to be done in a state of chillicity. If you have to think about it, then you need more practice, not just of spirit dance, but of all the layers below it in the pagoda, if you like. And this is the same. So what you can do and now you see why there are so many shamanistic techniques. They don't stand alone. You can mix and match. You can plug them into each other. They're modular. Yeah. And hence, you take thousands of techniques, and then you take thousands of other techniques, and then you mix them all together. You can see why I say the number of techniques. You now see why I say the number of techniques is verging on infinite. Yeah. But some techniques are more fundamental than others, and Bohkhgeen Hengreg is indeed a very, very fundamental.
You'd call it a core technique of shamanism.
Absolutely. Well, if I'd say it the other way around. If you use Bohkhgeen Hengreg as a core technique of your shamanism, then you're on fairly solid ground. That would be a sensible approach. I wouldn't say that it would be essential. No technique is essential. Yeah. There are alternative techniques that are probably just as good for various things, but I'll say the other way around. If you took the strategic choice to use Bohkhgeen Hengreg as a core technique of your shamanism, that would be a good idea.
Yeah.
So, Joe, I think we've actually done about an hour. Believe it or not.
Yeah, we have. I'm aware.
We got through one technique. I'm just scrolling down my enormous list of techniques. But I think that I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing because the things that you will learn through practicing Bohkhgeen Hengreg will help with the others. They'll help you make it faster. Once you get good at certain types of shamanistic technique, it makes it easier to learn other shamanistic techniques, easier and easier. And also, as we've said, once you get good at the layers, the bedrock layers of shamanism, that makes it easier to learn the upper layers. Yeah. So I don't think, we could say that this, a whole episode on one technique, may not be a bad idea. Because we knew the Amskar would be a multi-part series. So let's say that there's going to be at least 2 more episodes.
Absolutely. Well, we've always thought, when we get to the hardcore episodes, there'll be a few of them because they need going in depth.
Yeah.
And that's what this podcast's all about. We want to go in depth.
Yeah.
With everything.
And I hope that if you take there how I've explained Bohkhgeen Hengreg, and if you start to take the essence behind that way of looking at technique, and then you cross-reference that back to how we talked about understanding chillicity, then I hope that you yourself will now be able to derive some baseline understanding without me telling you, by putting those two things together. I think that should be achievable because there is a flavor to shamanism. There's a definite flavor to it, and that's it's a worldview. It's a way of looking at the world across all of those 3 levels: the top line, the midline, and the baseline. And there is some baseline in that, and that baseline has a flavor. And I would hope that by cross-referencing, first of all, by practicing the Chillicity exercises we've given, and we've given 1 Amskar exercise now, actually 2, because we did the Tilling exercise as well. Yeah. First of all, you will gain midline and top line understanding, middle world and upper realm understanding through that. You just will, if you practice that exercise in the way I've said, and you make sure that you're not thinking and that you're not introducing your own imagination into it, then you will gain midline and top line understanding. I hope that by cross-referencing the way in which I've described Bohkhgeen Hengreg and the way in which we describe the Chillicity exercises, you can yourself derive some baseline understanding now of what's going on in shamanism with respect to the baseline. Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic. One last question, which I think might be a quick one, but knowing you, it might not. This, if people want to go out and buy a drum or make a drum, I mentioned before about, we talked about the trance and stuff. Can we use the drum to basically practice chillicity or practice bat rather than?
Well, we did say that. Remember when we said when you're starting out with chillicity, you can use a count. You can use a count to distract you from far more complex types of thought. You can also use a drum to do the same thing, a drum beat to do the same thing, concentrate on the drum beat. We did say you could do that when starting out on chillicity, but if you need that at this point, when you start an Amskar, you really shouldn't be practicing Amskar yet. You should be back to your chillicity. You need to, before you start on Bohkhgeen Hengreg, which is one of the simplest Amskar techniques, you need to be able to just turn your chillicity on. If it takes you a few moments or even a couple of minutes to turn it on, then fine. But if you need a drum or a count to do that, then no, you're not ready. You're not ready. Go back to your chillicity exercises.
You know what? This is a little bit overplayed and a bit marketed, but this sounds to me like the real deal, Damon. It sounds really, really good stuff. I've thoroughly enjoyed this episode. I hope everybody else has. To me, it's been a real eye opener. So I hope I can practice this as much as everybody else as well. Thanks so much for listening. You can head over to the website wovenenergy.com. You can get them a blog post for this episode. You can read up on the show notes. We're going to see if we can, Damon, are we going to put a picture up? How to hold the drum?
I will definitely have a picture of my hand stuck through the tensioning cords.
Brilliant. So we'll check out the show notes, and there'll be some help there for that. If you can, please share the blog post. Let's spread this podcast as far and wide as we possibly can. You can email me at joe@wovenenergy.com. That's joe@wovenenergy.com with any questions that you might have, and I can put those forward to Damon for another Q&A session. Thank you very much. We'll see you next week. We'll carry on with stage 2 and some more exercises, hopefully, and we'll see you then.
Thanks a lot, Joe.
Cool.